Welcome back to American Vision's Vantage Point, where national and world events are analyzed through the superior lens of a Christian worldview.
Vantage Point is brought to you by American Vision. For more about today's topic, check out the best-selling book, The Christian Life and Character of the Civil Institutions of the United States. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.
I want to talk today about a couple of different issues. First, we'll kick it off with Obama's recent disapproval rating. Rasmussen ran their daily presidential tracking poll. On Sunday, 24% of the nation's voters approve of Obama's role as president. 47% strongly disapprove, which gives him an approval rating index of negative 23. Now, I'm not really surprised by this. But what do you all think? What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's a group that's no matter what he does, well, I think which is almost the case with any president. No matter what he does, they're going to approve,
right.
And no matter what he does, they're going to disapprove. And it's always that middle group. Everybody's vying for the middle. They're trying to pull from the middle on either side. And I think a lot of people have been fooled. I don't know if they fooled. Probably surprised with the direction that this Democrat Congress has taken us in, and also some of the policies of the president. I think the business establishment, which is what I'd like to focus on here, the business establishment is anxious because they really don't know what's going to happen next year. There's the Bush tax cuts are about to expire. What's that going to mean for small businesses? Then you've got the problem of what this health care is going to do. So a company says, look, I'm on the edge here. I'd like to hire a couple of people, but in hiring a couple of people, I don't know what my health care costs are going to be. I don't know what my profit margins are going to be. And so I think people who have not been ideologically pressed to make a decision about the president are making the disapproval of the president now is coming down on real specific empirical issues that are affecting them and their business. So I think that's where we're seeing most of the shift taking place.
But what kind of president? How much power does the president really have to affect the economy?
It depends on how much. Well, to affect the economy, it depends on how much support he has from his Congress. He can't do it by himself. But as you know, right now he's got both houses of Congress. And he's got the media at his back. You know, he just did this talk up, was it Wisconsin, where he did the talk this weekend?
Yeah, in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and had all of these, the audience was entirely composed of basically labor union members of all different sorts. So it was the group that will support him no matter what he does.
Probably the 24%.
It was interesting, I heard on NPR this morning, they covered that show, and they talked to one guy who was a truck driver and said, what do you think of these, this $50 billion stimulus he's calling for to fix bridges and highways and trains and all that kind of stuff? And the guy said, well, he said, I hope it does better than the last stimulus because, and this is what I think is funny, is his reasoning. The last stimulus only got to the administrators and didn't get filtered down to the people like me. So
that's kind of like foreign aid.
Exactly. Well, I mean, yeah, the fact is there, and it's a great criticism, but the whole point is the voters are just waiting for a bailout themselves. They don't have any principles of freedom. They'd call themselves free, but they're not. They want a handout. They want to be dependent on government, and that's the problem. You mentioned the swing vote. Somebody really ought to do a book on the tyranny of the swing vote, because it's the both sides is vying for that part of the vote that really drives the way things go in this country.
And policies are made based upon to get that swing vote to move one way or another.
Right.
And it's generally through some sort of governmental
That's the thing.
intrusion.
What are the politics of the swing voters? And they're almost all, whether they call themselves moderates or wherever they fall, it's almost all socialistic. We need how the government going to benefit me. So I mean that's terrible in my opinion. They're not principled voters by any stretch of the imagination. So right now, they're not seeing that money filter down to them, and like you said, there's also the uncertainty principle, and so yeah, I would predict that there would be a disapproval rating.
My understanding is that most of the first stimulus went to state municipalities. The money got tied up in preserving government jobs and balancing state budgets. didn't necessarily make it at all to small businesses wanting to get loans.
Yeah, you and I, we're involved in some small businesses, and we certainly didn't get any of it. We don't want any anyway, and it's not the way you run a business. But one of the interesting things about this $50 billion is supposed to be for roads and bridges, and I don't know if it says something about railroads. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, every time I go to the gas station, I'm paying a state tax related to gasoline, and I'm doing a federal tax related to gasoline, which a lot of people don't realize is the tax you're paying at the state level and at the federal level for a gallon of gasoline is way more than the oil companies get in terms of a profit on a gallon of gasoline. No one complains about that.
And they're always the villains.
Right, and the oil companies who take all the risks with all of this are the villains in this, where all the state does is collect the checks that are sent to them. But what's interesting about it, what have those taxes been going to? What have the state taxes been going to and the federal taxes been going to that's supposed to go for roads and bridges and so forth? Right. If this $50 billion is something beyond that, and everybody keeps complaining about our infrastructure, the roads have been built. I mean, the majority of roads have been built. I mean, the hard work and the expensive part of this has been over with.
Right.
Where's this money been going?
All this time, yeah. It's been going to feed bureaucrats is where it goes.
Yeah, it just goes into the general revenue, and they just spend it as they wish.
And not only that, but they expand the size of the administrations and the programs and everything that are supposed to manage these things, and all the money gets eaten up in the bureaucracy and the paperwork and the administration side of it. And then if they ever actually need a project again, they'll raise taxes again just to cover the project and keep the behemoth organization in place.
Yeah, and the other side of this is if a private company were to do this, like Enron and WorldCom, the principals go to jail. Our politicians do this, nobody blinks an eye. All we have to do is we just print $50 billion or create electronic $50 billion and throw it out there, and wow, that's okay. And
that was Bernie Madoff's big error. He didn't do what he did through the auspices of the Social Security Administration. He did it privately. If he'd have done the exact same thing through a governmental organization, he'd be fine. He'd be probably touted as a hero.
But again, Joel, your comment about the general worker out there, they really don't care. Long as they get some benefit by this, it really doesn't matter to them. They talk about trickle-down economics to them. For lots of Americans, is trickle down from revenue confiscated by the government or created out of thin air and given to me, so I benefit personally by all of this. Where the original trickle down was put the money back into the hands of the individual. Let them keep their own money, let them spend it, and it trickles through the economy that way. And therefore, people always pretty much know what the future is going to hold, because there isn't a group of laws out there that are going to come and impact us and change things, at the end of the year.
Yeah, I hired a guy recently to clean up some brush and sticks out of my backyard. He's just a yard worker, and he showed up with his son. He was kind of in his 50s, maybe 60. And they pulled up. They're loading this whole wagon load full of sticks and brush that I had. And in the midst of all this work, they're not getting paid very much to do it, the son says, "Yeah, I'm about to go join a union." And I can't remember exactly who, but his whole point was he doesn't have to work hard and he makes more money than he would otherwise doing the same jobs. He said, "Yeah, that's the way to go." And I didn't get a chance to have a discussion with him about it, but I can't count the number of people that I've run into that have worked construction all their lives and would say, "Yeah, I joined the union specifically for that reason. They don't bust your butt and they pay you more." And I mean, that's the way the average person thinks. What's in it for me immediately, not long term. No question of character, integrity, or freedom and responsibility, nothing like that. It's just, what can I get? What's the easiest route for me to get by? And of course, that same guy that told me that, I lived next door to him, one of the same guys that told me that, and he would get his paychecks and go blow it all on pot. And he was always in debt, always asking me to borrow money, and I never lent it to him. But I mean, that's the mentality. It's the character of the people you're dealing with, and it's incarnated in most of the bureaucracies and institutions of government that we have, including the administration.
And we're in a really precarious situation right now, because we're almost at a 50-50 split here, where you've got 50% of the people not paying any federal income tax, and you've got 50% of the people paying. once that thing tips to 50, 55, 56, we'll never be out from under this. And then the incentive for people who are in business, that starts to drop and said, why am I wasting my time with this? And then it's the whole Atlas Shrugged syndrome.
The whole thing collapses. The parasite kills the host.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I mean, even trying to educate people. I mean, getting people to understand integrity and principle is almost impossible. I mean, you have to be dedicated to someone from their youth up. And of course that brings in the idea of education and everything else. And so, you know, it's almost impossible to break through to people. But when you see the Glenn Becks and the Tea Parties and stuff like that just blossoming to the point where there are 27, 30, 28, 30% of the population saying, I identify with that, and that doesn't talk about the ones who haven't expressed their opinion. This is an encouraging thing.
There's a Baptist church in Florida who wants to have a Koran burning celebration. So what do you make of this?
Well, as you know, General Petraeus said this is bad because if we do this here in the United States and soldiers are going to die overseas, and so they shouldn't do this. That's very telling. And I was listening to some lady on a show this morning. She was saying, "Man, Christianity is ridiculed." And I remember Penn and Teller. I think they threw a Bible up in the air and took a shotgun and to it. It talks about the differences of the two religions. Christians don't go out and pillage and burn other people and behead other people, even when their religion is being attacked. Radical Islam does. And so now we've got this impression that if we do something and it upsets these radical Muslims, we're being told we shouldn't do that. Well, where do we start drawing the line on all of this? I don't think it's a smart thing to go out and burn a Koran. I mean, as Christians, we're trying to witness to the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that's the thing to do. I think it's a huge mistake, but at the same time, it does kind of tell us Islam, the radical side of Islam, is not this peaceful religion. And people say, well, it's only 10%. Well, 10% is a lot considering if there are a billion Muslims in the world. So I think it's a stupid thing to do, but the reaction overseas, what will happen overseas, is very telling of what Islam is all about.
Yeah, well, I think if they want to burn Korans, let them burn Korans, but I agree with you, it's a pretty stupid thing to do. I mean, number one, where are they getting the Korans? Are people just donating these things to be burned? If so, why are they having them in their house to begin with if they hate them so badly? I mean, I have an edition of the Koran printed by Penguin Media Group, so I mean, here's this humanist organization, maybe even owned by Jews, who knows, that it would be funding to do that. I mean, the point is, where are they coming from, who are they funding and doing it? The other fact, I mean, in Christians, there's a history of this. In Acts, when they were converted in Thessalonica, they brought all their books of black magic and sorcery out and they burned them. But I mean, this case is not a group of Muslims who converted and now they're burning their old book. But I agree with the apologists and some people I've read who say, no, don't burn the Quran, read the Quran. Because in the Quran and in the history of the Quran, there are all kinds of contradictions and things you can bring up in order to witness. So it's a more valuable book to have as a tool rather than as some kind of a religious statement that we want to burn your books.
Yeah, this has been, this is what the freedom idea is all about. Instead of suppressing, it said, look, if people had read Mein Kampf, they probably wouldn't have put Adolf Hitler into power. Rather than suppressing what somebody says about something, put it out there for them to see it.
Absolutely.
That's what this is all about.
Expose it to the world.
Thanks again for joining us on Vantage Point. Vantage Point at AmericanVision.org to get your comments and questions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
For more about the topic of today's show, check out the best-selling book, The Christian Life and Character of the Civil Institutions of the United States. It thoroughly delves into the many historical proofs that America was built as a Christian nation. The ACLU and Americans United for Separation of Church and State have done their best to ignore and stifle the content of this massive compilation of original source material. Don't miss out on this fantastic wealth of information in this 1,000+ page book. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.
Welcome to Gary DeMar's Vantage Point, where national and world events
stop.
They wear the same clothes 3 days in a row.